In this video, we'll look at how to set up your Flash interface as a series of Movieclip objects. In my timeline, I have layers that generally correspond to each of the movie clips in my scene. I have a background layer, a content layer, a navigation layer, a temp layer, and an actions layer. My actions layer is currently empty. The temp layer is not necessary. It's being used here for instructional purposes and includes labels that correspond to each of the movie clips in the scene. If I select one of the movie clips in my scene, in this case, the movie clip that sits on my background layer and also being used to hold my background content, you'll notice in the property inspector it's been given a label called color_background. The label that goes with that object is necessary to send messages to it. The other three objects in my scene also have labels. My content object has a label called content, my title object has a label called title, and my menu object has a label called menu. If I open up one of my movie clip objects, the background for example, I'll double click on it and you'll see that I'm inside scene 1, inside the background movie clip object. You'll notice it has its own unique timeline. That timeline has been configured into 5 frame spans. Each of those 5 frame spans have been given a label: start, 1, 2, 3, and 4. At the end of each of these frame spans, I've introduced an action. That action is simply a stop. We have a stop at the end of each of these frame spans, and by having a label and a stop in each frame span, we can instruct the playback head to go to a specific location, in which case it'll arrive there and play until it hits our stop action. It'll wait until it's given further instructions. Let's move back to the top of our scene and look inside the content object. We'll notice it's been configured in the same fashion. We have 5 frame spans, each given labels start, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and each frame span has a stop action at the end of it. Let's go back to the top of our scene. The last 2 objects in our scene, title and menu, require additional work. We'll use this as an opportunity to understand how the other 2 objects were set up. I'm going to open up my title object, and you'll notice my layers are set up and my first frame span has been established. I'm going to click and drag across the entire width of the timeline here at frame 10 and introduce a blank keyframe. I'm going to do this again at frame 20, insert, blank keyframe, and again at frame 30, and so forth. Now that I've established 5 frame spans inside my movie clip object for titles, I'm going to go through and add the labels for each of these frame spans. I'm going to come to the first frame inside my labels layer that corresponds to the second frame span. I'm going to come down to my label box and I'm going to type in 1 to correspond to the ones in my other movie clip objects. We'll do this again in each of the subsequent frame spans. Next, I'm going to move into my timeline and introduce a series of blank keyframes in the actions layer. Those blank keyframes will be used to hold the action stop at the end of each of my frame spans. In the actions layer at the end of the second frame span, I'm going to select the frame, open up my actions dialog, and find inside timeline control the function stop. You could also simply type stop, close parentheses, and semicolon. It'll work just fine. While this is open, I'll go ahead and select the next location in my timeline where I'm going to place a stop, and we'll do just that. I'll type stop, close parentheses, and semicolon return, and you'll notice that it highlights in blue and should perform in the same fashion as the stop that's retrieved here from the actions menu. With labels and stop actions placed bracketing each of these frame spans, I can cause my playback head to perform as I desire. But we're still missing content. So far we only have a piece of text in the first frame span. I'm going to borrow this piece of text and use it to establish the text label that goes with each of my other frame spans. You'll notice with this text selected that it's got a right justification. I can leverage that right justification so that each of my text stacks up on this same line simply by copying this text and then moving into the next frame span, being certain that I'm on the text layer, and then right-clicking and pasting in place. Now this text stacks with the text in the previous frame span, and I can simply just highlight start and replace it with the characters 1. I'll do this with each of the subsequent frame spans. Now with my title object configured, I have all of my labels in place, all of my stops in the right location, and you'll notice as we scrub the timeline, it reveals start, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's go back to the top of our scene. Let's open our menu object And we'll see that once again our timeline has been pre-configured with the right layers and also the 5 frame spans. All of my labels are in place and all of my stop actions are in place. This particular file, by the way, is being produced in ActionScript 2. In ActionScript 2, we can place functions or actions on individual objects in the scene as well as in the timeline. Note that in ActionScript 3, all actions must reside in the timeline. Next, let's open our menu object. Inside here, we have a series of 5 buttons. The 5 buttons correspond to the 4 different configurations of the interface after its initial state, and we finally have a button that sends it back to start, or what would be the initial state of the interface. We'll also notice that the timeline has been configured. We have our 3 layers, and we also have our 5 frame spans. Let's look at the actions I've applied to the buttons in our scene. The actions on each of these buttons are going to send messages to my 4 objects, causing the playback head inside of each to return to our frame labels. Let's select button number 1 and roll out the actions dialog. You'll notice inside button 1 I've already placed the on function. The on function also has 2 additional arguments placed inside the closed parentheses. These allow the mouse to be depressed over the top of the button 1 and cause it to return the set of instructions here between the 2 curly braces. You notice at the end of each of these set of instructions it says 1. 1 is the frame labels inside of each of our objects: color background, title, content, and menu. If we look at the other buttons in our scene, button number 2, we'll see the same exact set of action scripts. The only difference being at the end of each of these lines we see the word 2 instead of the word 1. If I scroll down and look at button number 3's actions, select button number 3, I see its actions all have the word number 3 at the end. And likewise for number 4, we see the word 4, and the only button that has no instructions on it yet is our return button. We're going to set up our script inside the return button to see how it was done in the other 4. I'm going to use the code assistant on the left hand side of the screen. If you look inside global functions, Movieclip control, we can find the on. If I double click on, it's placed in my actions dialog. The cursor is flashing inside the closed parentheses looking for arguments. The on function will not work without an argument. On what? On press, on release outside, on rollover, etc. I'm going to use the release argument, and then I'm going to use a comma, which will bring the pop-up up again, and I'll use release outside. Next I need to place my cursor between the 2 curly braces and then build the set of instructions that will be fired when on release or release outside occurs. Now I could construct the paths between my buttons and various objects in my scene using the target path tool. However, given the syntax I've used in this file, I'm going to suggest that for now you all type this and learn exactly what is going on. If I move back up to my button number 4, one of the things I can do inside ActionScript is borrow code from other objects in the scene. I'm going to copy this piece of ActionScript and return to my back button, place my cursor once again between the 2 curly braces, and paste the set of instructions that I retrieved from button number 4. I'll simply change 4 to say start on each of these. Let's test our movie. I'm going to go to the Control, Test Movie, and Flash Professional. We should find now if we depress any of these buttons, it'll pass a message to each of the 4 objects in our scene causing them to change. If I click on button number 2, we should see that the title is turned to number 2, the content is turned to number 2, and the background is changed to the number 2 background. However, our menu navigation doesn't exist anymore. You'll notice up above in the timeline, we've yet to locate our buttons in each of these other zones. Let's do that next. I'm going to go to my Start frame span inside my menu object and click on the timeline. It'll instantly select all the graphics that reside in that location. I'm going to move my cursor down into the stage area and right click. I'll copy and move my playback head over into the next frame span. I'll right click and paste in place. I'll go ahead and do this with the subsequent frame spans. Now my menu has buttons for each of my frame spans. Let's quickly test this. We can see that as we depress each button, all 4 objects in the scene change. However, it's not entirely evident with the menu. What we'd like to have happen is if we select button number 1, and now we see all of the portions of the interface that include the number 1 content changed, we no longer need a button number 1. So we'd like to have this substituted with a simple dumb graphic. It gives us an additional cognitive map of where we're located in the interface. We'll do the same for all 4 buttons. I've created a simple graphic and I've placed it inside the library. I'm going to use this as the substitute for my button when it's not needed. If we double click on this, we'll see it's a graphic symbol. You can create a graphic symbol simply by producing a graphic on the screen, right-clicking, and converting to a symbol. We use the graphic symbol as opposed to a button or a movie clip. Graphic symbol is typically used for a dumb object, an object, in other words, that's not going to perform any sort of task. To make use of that simple graphic symbol, I'm going to move my time slider over into the 1 portion of my timeline. I'm going to select button number 1, right-click, and I'll pull down to where it says Swap Symbol. You can't see this because it's outside of the screen capture software. A dialog appears allowing me to find another symbol in my library that I'm going to substitute. I have found the null button. I'm going to click OK. You'll notice now that button number 1 has been replaced by this graphic. If I scrub back to Start, you'll notice button number 1 is still there. If I scrub over to number 2, you'll notice that my button number 1 is still there. Now that I move my time slider into the frame span for number 2, I'll select my number 2 button and also replace this with a swap symbol with the null button. You'll notice now that button number 2 is missing. If I scrub my time slider back and forth, button number 1 is gone over the frame span number 1 where it's not needed. Button number 2 is gone over the frame span number 2 where it's not needed, and so forth. There's one last thing that has to be done with these empty buttons. The empty button on number 1, while we swap the graphic, the actions still exist on top of this symbol. Let's roll out our actions dialog and simply delete those actions. I'm going to follow suit by making the similar change on the null buttons inside each of my other frame spans. I'm going to remove the instructions off of the null button on frame span 2, and likewise for the other. We should see now when we scrub the playback head back and forth that as we move between each of the frame spans, a button is now missing. If we're in Start, we require all 4 buttons. If we're in number 1, we no longer require the button for number 1, and likewise for number 2, 3, and 4. Let's go ahead and test our movie. You'll notice now that when we select number 1, all of the objects in the scene change, including button number 1. If we select another button in the scene, likewise we find a similar situation. Now our interface seems complete.